Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Well, hello. I'm Chris Steyerwalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Welcome to Inkstained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. Eliana, first, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you very much.
A belated Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.
But I have a question for you.
Yes.
Who are the loudest Americans?
I have no idea.
Well, I think it may be your people. It may be the upper Midwest, may be the loudest Americans, because, you know, the Lord is really testing me on my people talking on airplanes problem. And I know it's my problem. I know
Wait,
that
you
it's
don't think people should talk on airplanes?
They shouldn't talk loudly. They should talk in library tones. If you want to talk on the airplane, you should speak like you were speaking in a library. You should speak in a low voice. You should speak as if you were talking about Axios. You should be quiet. And I, on my flight back from Chicago today, these lovely people, kind, no doubt, neighborly folks, I followed your advice. I put my ear pods in. I had noise cancellation. I did everything. And still I heard every detail of their lives. And I noticed it on the flight to Chicago as well. Just like geese, just loud talking about everything. I heard about the family reunion they were going to. I heard about how they got their tickets. I heard about their thoughts on the hotel. And for an hour and 45 minutes, they honked the entire time. And I know that it's my fault, because I shouldn't be so sensitive to these things. But I thought perhaps Chicago, Minneapolis, Milwaukee are the loudest Americans.
I think it's your sensitivity in the time of year. And I, for once, as ornery as I am, do not share this particular sensitivity.
I know you're better about this than I am. You're cool. You're cool. But
it's one of the very few things I'm cool with.
But I would be interested to hear from listeners which Americans are the loudest Americans. I nominate the upper Midwest.
Also, when you said my people, I did not think you were going to say the people of the upper Midwest.
I was staying with
positive that you were going to say the Jews, because that would probably be the correct answer.
Is that is that true, or is that regionally different? Like, are Jewish people from New York louder than Jewish people from Southern California?
I think they're all loud. I've been really enjoying, before we get into our front page, I've been loving this Netflix series that's been getting a lot of buzz, and I can attest it is fantastic. I had my husband start watching last night. He also loved it. I was wondering if it was a female thing, because it is sort of a rom-com, but he thought it was really clever. Nobody Wants This.
Okay, what is it?
And it is about a blonde non-Jew who meets a young, cute rabbi. And,
oh, dear.
Yes, and his family is aghast, appalled, all the things. And its portrayal of Jews and Jewish culture is very funny.
Endearing, no doubt.
It's very, very funny.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I'll check it out.
Okay, well, on our front page, should we talk storm politics? It does fit into the sort of pair of crises that I think will play into how this election turns out in November. Like it or not, these things are perceived through political lenses. One is the war in the Middle East, which is a crisis over which the Biden administration has no control, but the few undecided voters will have thoughts about how the administration is or isn't handling that. The other is the hurricane in the southeast that has hit swing states of North Carolina and Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, go ahead.
So many people have asked me, how will this affect the election? And there are Republicans who believe. So first, there is the untrue belief that the Biden administration was withholding aid or something. There is a lot of money flowing. There's a lot of money flowing. But the belief that the Biden administration was withholding aid from these places because they're heavily Republican. So the part of Western North Carolina that was so badly hit, Asheville obviously is Democratic, but Buncombe County and the environs are very Republican, right? They're 65, 70% Republican places. And a lot of Republicans have asked me, well, how will this affect the election? And certainly there will be some effect, right? There will be people who move away and don't come back, right? Somebody whose house got destroyed won't be back and they won't be voting there because they'll be living with their family someplace else. But I also think that there will be plenty of hippies, and I say that with love, plenty of hippies in Asheville who will be gone too. So it probably comes out, I don't think this will be hugely consequential in terms of the vote counting, but
Well, I think we should also note this has disrupted early voting, which is one thing to take into account. And I think the other thing to take into account is that, yes, federal money's flowing, but the impacts of that we won't see for, several months. Just the way it is.
And ever since 2005, when Democrats very successfully made Hurricane Katrina an expression of what they said was the dysfunction of the Bush administration, there has been, and we remember Superstorm Sandy in 2012, the effort to maximize or minimize or exploit when natural disasters occur in election years is nothing new. I don't know how effective the attacks are. And when Trump was saying that Brian Kemp couldn't get Biden on the phone, Brian Kemp came out and said, no, I did. And this is one of those things where normal people and the governors of these states are doing a good job, right? They're Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina, Tennessee affected too. Everybody seems to be doing a pretty good job. You've got 2 Republicans and a Democrat, and everybody seems to be doing okay and all that stuff. So, look, it's a very close election, and North Carolina is very close, and Georgia is very close. Will there be some effects at the margins? Yes, but I'm skeptical that this turns the race.
Well, we have Trump and Kemp appearing together today.
Awkward.
We're recording on Friday for the first time since 2020.
Awkward.
And Politico writes, the two men are scheduled to visit Evans, Georgia on Friday afternoon to be briefed on damage and to, quote, deliver remarks to the press, according to Trump's campaign. But the event is not being billed as a campaign appearance, and officials in Columbia County invited both men to attend the briefing. According to a person with knowledge of the appearance, granted anonymity to speak freely. What do you make of it, Chris?
Donald Trump, who once said that it would be better to have Stacey Abrams as governor of Georgia than Brian Kemp, who said that he was a no talent, he was bad. And I got to say, no one, I don't think, and there are probably examples people could point out, but no Republican has gotten through the Trump era better than Brian Kemp, period. There are other examples I'm sure people could put forward, but Brian Kemp, Donald Trump tried to steal the election in Georgia. Brian Kemp said no. On multiple occasions when Republicans tried to do goofy stuff and the Georgia Republican Party lost its mind and all of that stuff, Brian Kemp kept swinging his axe. And one of the things that Kemp did well was he didn't stop being conservative, right? He didn't change who he was. He didn't bend the knee for Trump. And it obviously made Trump crazy, right? Made him very upset. And that Kemp won while Trump's endorsed Senate candidates lost, I'm sure was very galling. But now Trump knows that he needs him, praised him publicly. J.D. Vance went down and had gushy, nice things to say about Brian Kemp. So Brian Kemp, if you'll pardon the pun, weathered the storm. And he knew that the time would come that they would need him more than they wanted to hate on him. So here we are again.
Well, Politico's coverage of Harris's visit to Georgia was amazing, amusing, predictable.
What were they on about?
You can tell me the right word. The headline is Harris consoles those devastated by Helene in Georgia, a contrast with Trump's visit. In case you didn't get it, they're just going to beat you over the head with it. It says the former president made his visit political. The vice president kept hers focused on disaster relief.
Oh, dear.
Because that's not political either. Her visit was totally apolitical, not aimed at helping her campaign. So they write, Kamala Harris, surveying the wreckage of Hurricane Helene in a swing state on Wednesday, offered a glimpse of how she might fulfill the role of consoler-in-chief. Against a backdrop of felled trees in Augusta, Georgia, the vice president telegraphed solidarity as she spoke about the assistance the administration is providing to communities devastated by the severe weather that tore through the southeastern United States last weekend. Blah, blah, blah. The Democratic nominee's approach offered a stark contrast to the overtly political posture Donald Trump took during his visit to Valdosta, Georgia earlier this week, when he accused President Joe Biden and his administration for failing to deliver the aid needed by the community.
Nah. So yes, hers was pure. His was tainted by politics.
And Chris, oh, this was the other crisis. I meant to say that there were three, although this one has been averted for the time being. The third, other than the world on fire in the Middle East and the natural disaster domestically in the Southeast, was the Dockworkers strike that could have been really bad and had a real impact on the relationship, but lasted about a day. And the Wall Street Journal had a great profile of the man leading that strike, Harold Daggett,
This guy.
Profane 78-year-old leading the Dockworkers strike. And he's quoted saying, they won't be able to do anything in this country without my people.
Blanking people.
So,
And
exactly.
The astonishing cruelty of this guy, bragging about people wouldn't get baby formula, people can't get anything that they need, we're going to shut this whole country down. And he knew. So the Taft-Hartley Act empowers the president to take action when there are labor actions that threaten national security or a broad understanding of national security. So this is one where obviously if they're effectively blockading the ports, the president could invoke executive authority granted to him by Congress and force them to go back to work. But they knew Biden was not going to do that in an election year when he and Harris is underperforming Biden with union members. She very notably did not. She got neither the Teamsters nor the firefighters unions endorsements. They didn't endorse Trump, but they didn't endorse her. And this posed this huge problem for Biden. So the longshoremen say they won't strike until January, right? They're going to wait until after the election to do this. And they want, it is true, a 77% raise, I think, over however many years.
Over 6 years.
Over
and
6
they
years.
rejected the offer was for a 40% raise over 6 years. And the federal government got it nudged up to 50%, and they rejected and went on strike nonetheless. And a previous article in the Journal had noted that some of these guys are making between $150,000 and $250,000 a year. And this article actually has their hourly work. So this says that of Daggett, he's gunning for a 77% pay increase over 6 years, which would raise the base hourly rate for dock workers to $69 from $39.
The most significant request that they have, the demand that they have, is that there be no automation, that nothing be done to automate the ports. And it's interesting because in other industries, mining, steelmaking, other automaking, this was something that 50 years ago, unions said, you can't bring in automation. And of course, because the ports are fixed locations, there's only one port of Savannah, there's only one port of Charleston, one port of Baltimore. These are Norfolk. These are these are places. The obvious answer to a work stoppage that would threaten the whole American economy and disrupt people's lives is basically they're making the argument for automation. As they threaten a strike, or as they began a strike against automation. So when Hollywood writers and then eventually actors went on strike and AI was part of their request, you can go for a while, right? We can watch old stuff. We can get by for a long time. You cut off baby formula imports and people are going to say, automate, bring the robots, let the robots run the ports and do that work so that we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
Yeah. Well, this journal profile has an interesting bit on his alleged mob ties.
A
And
longshoreman connected to organized crime?
yeah.
I find that hard to believe, Eliana Johnson.
It really gave me flashbacks to The Wire. So they write, Daggett's work at the Union has sometimes attracted the attention of authorities who have previously accused him of mob ties, claims he has denied. In 2005, he stood trial in Brooklyn on wire and mail fraud charges alongside another ILA official and an alleged mobster, accused of steering union benefits contracts to firms that paid kickbacks to organized crime. Witnesses testified that Daggett was elevated through the ILA by the mob because he was an associate of the Genovese crime family. Daggett recounted in testimony being held at gunpoint by a mobster, according to media reports at the time. He said he was terrified of the crime families and went out of his way to avoid them. The three defendants were acquitted. Lawrence Ricci, the defendant alleged to be a Genovese crime family member, went missing during the trial and was later found dead in the trunk of a car outside the Huck Finn Diner in Union, New Jersey. Leaving the cargo terminal in Elizabeth, New Jersey early Tuesday morning, he suggested in his gruff manner that he and ILA members are digging in for a lengthy showdown. I don't have a effing crystal ball between my legs, but it will last very long. I would tell you that, Daggett said. Well, turned out he was wrong.
He was wrong about that, and you can hear the Goodfellas soundtrack coming on in the background as you were reading about bodies being found in trunks of cars and diners in New Jersey. Perfect, amazing.
Yeah, let's talk about the VP debate.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we have pulled, I think, a piece of bad coverage of it and a piece of really good coverage of it, and then another piece of stupid, very bad coverage. So our bad coverage, thank you, Washington Post. Well, Chris, first, what did you think before we get to it?
Well, the great Mark Leibovich piece about Tim Walz being a phony turned out, and being too good at being a phony, turned out to be incorrect. The Leibovich piece, which is really well written and really insightful, and I got a whole piece kicked out of where he started me talking about the contrast between him and Vance. But the premise
I liked that piece.
Was a good piece.
I was frustrated that it was missing specific examples. So I thought I could have used that, but yeah.
But it was a good profile. I really enjoyed it. And the premise was he's too good at this. He's too slick. Well, that was not the case. Tim Walz was not too slick. He was vapor locked and obviously nervous. He was obviously just choppy seas for that guy. And I think, I'm going to guess, it's because he prepared for the wrong J.D. Vance, that he was expecting the acid-tongued, taunting, very sharp J.D. Vance that we see on the trail most frequently. But instead, he got the sweet country boy J.D. Vance, who was back to talking about his Meemaw, and J.D. Vance was very good, right? He was very good until the very end when he blew it. But the 90% of the debate, J.D. Vance was as good as I've ever seen him. And Tim Walz looked like he needed a potty break.
Yeah, our headline was Dad in Headlights. And he did look like a Grampy in headlights.
And he's only 6 months older than Kamala Harris. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that Vance was better than I've ever seen him. And there were comments, I'm like watching Twitter during the debate, And people are saying, wow, Vance has obviously benefited from all these adversarial interviews he's done. And sure, I'm sure that's true. But I think that this involved a lot of other preparation for Vance because he did not come across the way that he has come across in those adversarial interviews. He came across differently, sort of softer and with more finesse. And I don't just think that Walz was bad because Vance good. I think he was bad because he was bad.
Yeah,
Um,
he was nervous.
he
He
was
was
very
ill-suited for the
nervous,
work.
and he clearly was hamstrung by not being able to talk about what Kamala Harris would do,
Right.
whereas Vance could be forward-looking by being backward-looking, talking about what Trump did do. Walz couldn't be forward-looking by talking about what Harris would do because she hasn't said much about that.
Well,
And the same
Vance
sort of commentary, people were saying, wow, Walz would have really benefited from doing more interviews. And he's been basically locked up since the debate as well. And I'm not sure about that. I'm not actually sure if he's capable. The one thing that he should have known he was going to be asked about, because there was a CNN piece on it earlier in the day and there was a New York Times piece on it earlier in the day, was why did you lie about being in being in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre? And he didn't have like a 2-line answer to shut that down.
it was until the next day, and
Right,
he
exactly.
he coughed something up. I think that JD Vance, they were both there to try to help the principals on their tickets. But JD Vance knew who he was talking to. And he wasn't talking to Donald Trump. He was talking to mainstream Republican voters who are uneasy about Donald Trump. And the JD Vance that won the vice presidential nomination was someone who makes them very uncomfortable, right? On foreign policy, particularly. I don't care what happens to Ukraine and blah, 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 blah. JD Vance did not change any of his positions except for on abortion, but he's in open field running. The Republicans are now just in open field running now, changing on abortion. But except for on abortion, he didn't change his positions, but he changed the framing. And he adopted a kind of Reaganite, he used the phrase peace through strength. He adopted a kind of Reaganite tone, and overall a tone of calm, kindness, decency, a nice, stable figure, a, dare I say, Pencean kind of figure, which is what you need to be if you're running with Donald Trump, because what you're saying, if you're Donald Trump's running mate, is, I know, he's crazy, but he's okay. I'll be there. I'll calm him down. It will be fine. And JD Vance did that. And that was very good. And all the way up until, and talking about questions that you know that you're going to be asked and you don't have an answer for, I was reminded, you remember the Ross Douthat interview that he did with
Yes,
JD Vance?
yes.
And you read the Ross Douthat interview, you go through and you say, hey, wow, okay. JD Vance, maybe he's still a thoughtful person. Maybe he hasn't totally changed. This is interesting. It's interesting. And then you get to the end of the interview. Okay, who won the 2020 election? Red alert, can't answer it. And the nonsensical, well, we would have, I would send it back. Well, you can't send anything back if you're the vice president. You can't, as a vice president, you can't command North Carolina to conduct a recount. There's no power in doing that. And obviously, if Mike Pence would have refused to execute his constitutional duty, it wouldn't have made Donald Trump president, right? But it would have precipitated a crisis. And JD Vance knows all that, but he can't. It's just a place where Trump holds Republicans hostage, which is the correct thing for JD Vance to say, both ethically and politically, is, yeah, well, Joe Biden won that one, but and you can even throw in something about, there were a lot of COVID rule changes. You can even do some soft soap for people who are agitated on the question, but you say yes and say, and look what we got. look what we got. That, you know what, he did win, and the country lost, and that's why we're going to correct that error in November. And that's all you have to say. But he couldn't say it.
Yeah, he's not allowed to say that. Well, the point you make about Vance putting uneasy Republicans at ease was the point of the Wall Street Journal story about
The
the
great
debate that was
Molly
very
Ball.
good by
The
Molly
great Molly
Ball,
Ball.
which was J.D. Vance's version of Trump is better than the real thing. And the lead is, without Donald Trump, there is an easy target. Democrats' argument is much harder to make. That was the most obvious conclusion from Tuesday's vice presidential debate between Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz. With deftness, discipline, and finesse, Vance, the Ohio senator, prosecuted the case against the current administration while calling back to a not always recognizable vision of Trump's term in office and his exit from it as a time of comparative peace and prosperity. Peace was really good. And
J.D. Vance, who told us that Donald Trump saved Obamacare. The piece was very good, and the Wall Street Journal editorial board came along the day after, I believe, and basically echoed Molly's piece and said, like, this is the way. This is how you beat the Democrats, is you focus on these issues, you speak in a disciplined way, you do it this way. But I don't think that will prevail.
well, the bad piece, I think, was written by the Washington Post, which
Yes,
was
it sure was.
Vance peddles Trump agenda in softer tones, misleading ways during debate. The Republican
Making sure
vice
they get it in the
presidential
headline.
nominee used the primetime slot to try to repackage MAGA for the political middle, his latest well-timed reinvention.
I mean, that part's true, but so Tim Walz would have loved to have peddled Kamala Harris's agenda repackaged for the middle. He would have he that's what he was trying to do and couldn't. That's like what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's really just beating you over the head with the opinion and point of view.
It was, and it really had a clickbait. When the Post is at its worst, it is this kind of unsubtle clickbaity, like, oh, I wonder
That
what
did
you
not make me
think.
want to click.
Well, you know who it's for, though, right?
Yes.
That was for Democrats who were feeling blue the next day, and they watched their guy walk like a dog, and they were feeling bad. And the Washington Post, just in the same way that right-wing outlets the day after the Trump debate were like, actually, Kamala Harris is even worse than you think, and this blah 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 blah. So this is, what do the kids call it? Cope? Is that right? Am I using that correctly?
Yeah, you
yes. So this is cope, is what this is.
are. Maybe the stupidest piece about the debate was
I'm ready.
Politico what was most frightening about this piece, the headline is 8 body language tells
Oh,
from the vice
boy.
presidential debate.
Oh,
So the
boy.
most frightening thing about it was it's by a guy, Joe Navarro. And then the piece says, Joe Navarro is the author of the international bestseller, What is Saying. Ha ha. An ex-FBI agent's guide to speed reading people and the Dictionary of Body Language, a field guide to human behavior. So I'm somewhat disturbed that the FBI uses this sort of analysis on people, because Joe Navarro posits that Vance's beard broadcasts to women a aggression and opposition to feminist ideals.
You think that's right?
And that
I think
Tim,
it makes him not look like a baby-faced chubster, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
It is masculine, but I don't think it broadcasts I'm not a feminist.
Well, I think we can say he is not without the beard. I think even
Of
without the
course,
beard, yes.
I don't know what the beard has to do with it. And then the best was Walz's wide eyes showed passion. When Walz felt especially passionate about something, he'd open his eyes wide as saucers. Eye popping can sometimes be a sign of surprise, but for Walz, it simply revealed his emotional intensity, like this moment during an exchange about abortion. The orbicularis oculi muscle, working in concert with the corrugator and frontalis muscles, contract to raise the eyebrows. a dynamic and emphatic facial motion that grabbed the viewer's attention.
You're not going to
Early
get
humans,
you're not going to get that kind of coverage anywhere.
no,
You're not going to get
early
that kind of
humans
insight
would have
anywhere.
made such facial gestures to communicate strong emotions, like danger is close, and that's actually what it looked like for Walz. But he says for Walz, it gave extra weight to his feelings and held our gaze. Yikes!
Glad we have these insights. Call the boys at Quantico. We've got it.
All right. And, Chris, it's funny. So the journal's coverage was Vance is misleading. What didn't rate a mention was Walz's claim. And these were among some of his strongest moments of the debate, which was in the January 6th section. Unfortunately, I don't think too many people were still tuned in the last 10 minutes of the debate. So Vance, struggled in the segment about January 6th because he can't say what he thinks and he can't say the truth. But when he pivoted to say, well, you're just as bad because you don't believe in the First Amendment and you said hate speech should be illegal, because Walz is on video saying that you don't have a right to hate speech. And Walz asserted you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And I've yet to see the fact checkers, Daniel, Dale at CNN and whoever else they are, fact check Walz's claim that you actually can.
Well, first of all, I don't know that J.D. Vance believes in the First Amendment either, given his desire to regulate, break up, do whatever to social media companies that don't leave up content that he wants. So I'm not going to grant J.D. Vance the claim that he is some sort of First Amendment absolutist. I think he is not. But I definitely, my ears perked up at the you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You certainly can yell fire in a crowded theater. You will suffer the consequences of yelling fire in a crowded theater, but you can do it, right? You can do it. I don't think people will be happy with you if you do, but the idea that these two approaches to limiting free expression, Vance's and Walz's, are both, wrong. They're both wrong. You have a good encapsulation of these two views about how the government should be allowed to control what people say and do. And Walz's is the one that we're more familiar with, which is what comes from the left. And we ought to make sure that people aren't saying things that are bad on the internet. We ought to make sure that people aren't saying bad things. These are people who like the fairness doctrine for broadcast. These are people who think that the government can regulate free speech in the same way that they regulate machine guns, right? That, well, there's free speech, but there's a limit on that. There oughtn't be. And the case that Vance is referring to has been widely, it's dismissed. It's not that's not where the law is anymore.
Should we talk about Melania Trump?
Wow. Wow. Well,
She has a promotional
I need you to
video
decode.
Up. Yeah, I have no idea.
I need you to decode what's going on here, because here's what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, what it looks like is, so the two data points that we have. One, Melania Trump's publicist asked CNN for a $250,000 appearance fee.
Wait, we skipped the video.
No, I'm not going to skip the video.
Okay.
So the two data points I have is that Melania Trump's publicist asked for a $250,000 appearance fee from CNN to do an interview with her. And when CNN said, what? And they said, oh, this was sent in error. Like, I'm sorry, who was it for? Who is paying a $250,000? And why is Melania Trump collecting a $250,000? She's rich. Well, I don't understand, number one. Number two, and we can talk about the ethics of paying for appearances later if you want. But then in her book, she has a whole riff on abortion, and that she is basically a pro-choice absolutist coming all the way out. Is this what she thinks? Is this what she's saying because she's trying to help her husband, that, like, as the Republican Party reinvents itself as a pro-choice party in a 5-week span? Is this part of that? Is this intentional? Is this undermining? What does this mean?
I wish I could decode it. Honestly, the $250K thing, weird. I would be sort of shocked if she commanded that much as a speaking fee.
Well, I mean,
so passionate about having her appear at an event that they would pay. That's a lot.
Well, somebody who wants to be in with the Trumps might, right? If you were,
I guess, yeah.
if you were looking for access, that, you know, if you came across with $250,000 for the former president's
That's
wife.
just a weird way to get it. Like, if you want access, you can donate to the super PAC.
But maybe this,
You know,
somebody will pay it. My assumption is that someone will pay it.
but I agree it must have actually been a mistake because I don't believe that was intended for CNN.
You don't think so?
I don't believe they sent that to CNN intending for CNN to pay them $250,000 for an interview. No, I don't.
Oh, see, I mean, I think it could be a bad staff work situation in either way, which is bad staff work. One is the person didn't know that you shouldn't send that request to CNN, and they sent it. They treated them like they were, you know, whatever, you know, Gulf State News Network or whoever might pay that. And, or as you say, that they didn't mean for it to go out at all. And it wasn't bad judgment. It was actual error. I don't know.
I think it was like the wrong attachment. Oops. That's my guess. I of course don't know.
But the abortion thing, help me here.
The abortion thing, again, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Look, I could see it. Let's say she's trying to help Trump's campaign. Like, I could see Democrats jumping on that and saying, like, even this guy's wife thinks what we do. I don't really think injecting abortion back into the conversation, there's a way for that to benefit Republicans.
Well, I mean, if the thinking is we are, as we heard J.D. Vance do in the debate, as we've heard Trump do multiple times, if the thinking is, and I believe Barbara, and this is like a reality television version of Barbara and George H.W. Bush, whether it was Barbara Bush and her son or her husband. I'm sorry, I'm fuzzy on this, but Barbara Bush let it be known basically that she was pro-choice, and she did it in a much more.
I was going to say, well, there are a few ways to go about doing that. This isn't what I would have, had in mind.
So there would be, theoretically, there would be political utility in having a first lady, former first lady, candidate for first lady say, I'm influencing my husband on this issue. Don't worry, ladies, I'm influencing my husband on this issue. There might be some utility to it. So again, we're with the same question about the $250,000 speaking fee. Bad execution or really bad execution? Is it that they were trying to do something helpful and made it way overbroad and all that stuff? Or is she trying to sandbag him? There's
no idea.
No idea. It's just that, well, let's be clear about what the most bizarre part of all of it is. Why on earth is the candidate, why is a major party nominee's spouse putting out a book 5 weeks before the election? What on earth? Why would you do that?
No idea.
It's insane. Executed perfectly, in cooperation with the campaign to push her out on a tour. And if the book was like, Why My Husband is Great, and I'm so excited. If Doug Emhoff came out with a book called Mamala, Why She's the Best for America, you'd say, okay, heck, but it's a vehicle. This makes no sense. And it makes no sense that she's trying to make money on it. I truly am mystified by Melania Trump and everything around her.
I have no good answers for you.
Right, well,
truly, there may not be any relationship I have spent less time thinking about.
I find it very, very interesting. And just as somebody who appreciates the practice of politics, the campaign spouse, Doug Emhoff, is like textbook campaign spouse. He had his problems, but he is excited about his spouse. He is loyal and supportive and excited. No one is more excited than he is. And he's happy to be there by her side and gives the speech and does the stuff, because what the political spouse is supposed to do is vouch for this person to the wider voting public. It's okay, whatever you think about this person, he or she is really nice at home and really good with the kids and is really good. It's a character witness. Usha Vance is another great example of somebody who said, I know what some of you think of him, but let me tell you, when it gets down to it, he's a good man. And that's what you want. So Melania Trump is one in a row, that's for sure.
All right.
Oh, this. Oh, this.
Oh, this is all you.
What do you mean this is all me? Why
All
is this
you.
all me? You don't do blackface? You don't do the blackface beat?
I'm happy to weigh in, but I'm glad to see that the New York Times not doing a lot of investigative reporting on Kamala Harris, but I'm glad to see that they're doing some investigative reporting this election season.
Well, I'm going to get
hit us.
So the story is that Mike Lawler, New York congressman, appeared in blackface in October 2006 to portray Michael Jackson at, I'm guessing, a Halloween party. It's October. I don't know. Oh, yeah, Halloween costume. And in the tradition that going back to, remember Ralph Northam?
And he was 20.
Remember the Ralph Northam?
Of course.
When you know that when you're rooting to be the Klansman, that was the Ralph Northam yearbook picture where Ralph Northam was either, the photo caption was unclear,
exactly.
either in blackface or dressed as a Klansman. And you know you're having a bad day in politics when your aides are thinking, let him be the Klansman. That'd be a lot better. That'd be a lot better if he was dressed as a Klansman. So I'm going to guess that Lawler who is in a very competitive House seat race with Mondaire Jones. And I'm going to guess that this is Oppo research and that the New York Times didn't find it, but that it was brought to the New York Times that Mike Lawler had done this. So first, kudos to Mike Lawler. He didn't deny it. He said, yes, it was me. It was dumb. It was a different time. And I wouldn't do it again. I was 20 and I was really into Michael Jackson. And that's the part of the story that I find the most interesting.
I also, by the way, thought his response was perfect. It was what Tim Walz did not do during that debate when he royally screwed up his response.
And the Lawler, the part of it that I find the weirdest is Lawler talking about how into Michael Jackson he was. Says, oh, by the way, the New York Times recounting of the history of blackface is just precious. But where does he say it?
It says that Lawler described himself as an ardent Jackson fan.
But he says it's something about that it was at the peak of Michael Jackson, people's obsession with Michael Jackson. Not in 2006, bro.
Lawler was named his class's valedictorian in 2009. He was also well known on campus for his affinity for Jackson, one of the era's leading cultural figures, which not really in 2009. And it says in 2005, as a high school senior, Mr. Lawler flew from New York to California to attend parts of Jackson's criminal trial. The pop star had been charged with molesting a 13-year-old boy at his Neverland Ranch. The case ended in acquittal. Randy Taraborelli, a Jackson biographer, helped get Mr. Lawler into the courtroom and recalled in his book that the young fan had been so disgusted by testimony against Jackson that he couldn't help but mutter something derogatory under his breath. And so Lawler was removed from the courtroom.
What in the world? I'm sure that if I was confronted with everything that I said or did when I was 19 or 20 years old, I would be chagrined, no doubt. But who's a Michael Jackson enthusiast to the point of what dude is dressing up as Michael Jackson at age 20 and going to his trial? What? This goes in the Melania Trump
testimony.
This goes in the Melania Trump basket of I simply do not understand. I simply do not understand.
All right. In business news, Chris.
Oh.
New York Magazine's Olivia Nuzzi
her
ex-fiance, Ryan Lizza, of orchestrating a blackmail campaign against her. And she charged in a filing in D.C. Superior Court that Lizza, who has now taken a leave of absence as Politico investigates this, hacked one of her devices and obtained all this compromise on her and then was sending it out to people, which is a crime if that did happen. So And apparently on that phone were her correspondence, whatever, FaceTime videos with RFK Jr. So as this trial proceeds in DC Superior Court, we're going to find out which one of them is a total and complete liar, presumably.
Do you think this goes to trial really, really?
I don't know. So the court granted a temporary restraining order, and I guess police accompanied her to retrieve her belongings from his house. I look, I don't have enough insight into
very
the
sa-
situation, but wow, it's becoming like a real
It's
tabloid drama.
it's tawdry, and I feel very bad for Olivia Nuzzi. This is tough stuff, and I'm gonna hope, for the sake of everyone involved, that this does not go to trial, and that this is allowed to be quiet. It would be okay if this could be quiet. Woof, I say. Woof, I say.
And up next,
Oh, this is your jam right here,
missing a little
sister.
bit. The awful Taylor Lorenz exits the Washington Post to launch User Mag on Substack, and she claims, in the Hollywood Reporter, which touted this as an exclusive, she told them, "I just wanted to get out of legacy media. I feel like it's just really, really difficult to do the kind of reporting that I want to do on the internet with these kind of older institutions as a primary job." Lorenz told the Hollywood Reporter in an interview, and she says, "I like to have a really interactive relationship with my audience. I like to be very vocal online, obviously. And I just think all of that is really hard to do in the roles that are available at these legacy institutions." Well, it turns out that that is correct, because Dylan Byers of Puck reported that she was pushed out of the Washington Post because she posted online a photograph of Joe Biden at the White House, calling him a war criminal, and she then denied doing that to her bosses at the Post and said that a friend had posted the comment. And the Post conducted an investigation, and she was pushed out of the job. So,
How long ago did the New York Times, in the greatest swindle?
Yeah, they had foisted her on the Post.
Yeah, and the greatest swindle since the Red Sox sold Babe Ruth was the New York Times offloading Taylor Lorenz onto the Washington Post, who hired her. How long ago was that? Was that 2 years? A year?
It must have been 2 years ago.
And when it happened, we said, "You'll be sorry, Washington." You'll be sorry, Washington Post. But I will give her credit for this. She lasted longer than I thought she would. I did not think that she would last as long as she did at the Washington Post.
Okay. All you, Chris.
Well, let me turn now to praise the Washington Post. So Tom Boswell, their sports columnist. So Pete Rose died, and Pete Rose is to say the least, a complicated figure. And his death kicked off a conversation about Pete Rose, who went to prison for tax evasion, who was banned from baseball for life for betting on his own games, and had become, but celebrated by many, right? Pete Rose is a kind of hillbilly anti-hero, right? He's the guy, he's a Johnny Paycheck kind of hair shirt and a type that I recognize from growing up, a type that is much revered and much respected in Appalachia, which is, you take this job and shove it. I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. And of course, Pete Rose was the greatest hitter, right? He broke Ty Cobb's record. He was amazing. And none of that, Ty Cobb probably wasn't a very nice person. Ty Cobb was not a nice person. In fact, he was a racist, and he was all that stuff. And Pete Rose is a great example of the friction point between being a gifted athlete and being a cultural figure and a person and all of that stuff. And Boswell did just a superb job in weaving it all together and talking about it that way. And of course, it kicked off a conversation that we have had here on multiple occasions, which is about sports gambling. In the same way that people talk about it's unfair for people who have criminal records for marijuana possession or selling marijuana in places where marijuana is now legal, Pete Rose's death prompts the question, in an industry that now relies on sports gambling as a massive revenue feed, how fitting is it that Pete Rose be excluded from the Hall of Fame for his sins? And I, an annoying person, will point out that, of course, Pete Rose shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because he bet on his own games. And he didn't go on FanDuel and bet on somebody else's game. He went to a bookie and he bet on his own games. And that was his punishment, and that's the way it is, and that doesn't need to change. Sorry to Cincinnati Reds fans. But Boswell's piece is real, real good.
Chris, that brings us to our style section. And first up, I loved this piece. The Wall Street Journal, this piece is from a month ago, but I don't know how I missed it at the time. The Wall Street Journal had a piece. The headline is, "Too timid to tell the boss you're quitting? There's a service for that."
Oh, come
Amid
on.
a labor shortage in Japan, some employers are rebuffing resignations. A new field is helping workers bust free. And it tells the story of a guy whose boss would not accept his resignation. And this guy, Yuta Sakamoto, says, "I would have been mentally broken if I had continued," says Sakamoto, 24, who found a new job as a salesman at a printing firm. So he paid $200 and his case details to a quitting agency. Okay.
Amazing.
And the company is called Exit, and it helps people quit. And the founder says, "Americans may be surprised, but I was too shy or too scared to say what I think. Japanese are not educated to debate and express opinions." Exit now handles more than 10,000 cases a year in which its staff quits on behalf of clients. Many competitors have emerged bearing names such as Mo Murray, "I can't do it anymore," or Yamatera Ainen, which asks, "Why don't you quit?" in the dialect of Osaka, where people are known for being more self-assertive than in Tokyo. So I just thought this was amazing and loved it. And yeah, Exit.
This next piece brought to us by alert listener, my eldest man-child, who is a chicken tender enthusiast. And the New York Times has a story on the 50th anniversary of the invention of chicken tenders at a Greek restaurant in New Hampshire. And despite their local fame, the fried chicken tenders were almost unknown outside of New Hampshire for at least a decade. That changed for good in the 1980s when Burger King, jealous of the McNugget, introduced its own handheld morsels of fried chicken. A $20 million advertising campaign for the chain's new chicken tenders worked too well. When locations around the country ran out of chicken, Burger King had to pull the ads. The campaign had another effect, according to lawyers for the restaurant. It inspired imitators to sell their own chicken tenders. Burger King sued one of them, a poultry packing firm, for trademark infringement. The trial was more dramatic than the run-of-the-mill intellectual property proceeding. As one of the 9 days, a professor showed the courtroom where the tenders come from by breaking down a 3-pound plucked chicken with a butcher's knife. Burger King won the case. The jury decided that, in effect, the words chicken tender described a product rather than a mere muscle. One result of the verdict is that the tender became a marketing term, like chicken fingers. Many people think the two items are interchangeable, although few of those people live in Manchester. Tender connoisseurs have little trouble knowing when they've ordered pectorialis minor and have been given pectorialis major instead. Can you, Eliana Johnson, tell the difference between a chicken finger and a chicken tender?
Absolutely not.
Really?
No way.
Really?
No way.
The chicken finger, well, I may be getting this entirely wrong, but I think of the tender as the denser strip, right? It's more like a strip, and the finger is the flatter kind. I think that's true.
No
Am
way.
I wrong?
could
Am I
ever
crazy
tell.
here?
There's no way I could ever tell.
Are you a chicken tender enthusiast? I assume.
I like them, but I would always get a cheeseburger over a chicken nugget. Like I would
The
never get the chicken nuggets at McDonald's
the
or at
chicken
Burger King.
the best chicken tenders, and maybe they're chicken fingers. I don't know. Now I'm questioning everything. Are at the Jefferson Hotel in Richmond, Virginia. Ask anybody who's ever had them. A truly spectacular dish. One of the best things they've ever eaten because of the breading to meat ratio. It's divine because you don't want it cakey, you don't want it battery, but you do want it to have some crunch. and it's the good white meat. Chicken tenders, I'm here for you. I'm a fan.
Okay, well, that brings us to the next item, which is
Yes.
something that I am a fan of and do have opinions about because I like them. McDonald's is finally selling the Chicken Big Mac in the U.S. Beginning October 10th, the highly anticipated sandwich will be sold for a limited time at McDonald's U.S. locations. The Chicken Big Mac is similar to its beefy sibling. However, it replaces the two burgers with 2 tempura chicken patties. It also includes the signature Big Mac sauce, pickles, shredded lettuce, and a slice of American cheese. McDonald's has been vocal about adding more chicken to its menu, which is generally cheaper than beef. CEO Chris Kempczynski said in its most recent earnings call that it's focused on adding growth drivers like chicken in an attempt to reverse slumping sales. Chicken is now on par with beef sales at its restaurant, he added. Well, I do love a chicken sandwich. I don't really care about chicken fingers, tenders, whatever, but I love a fried chicken sandwich.
Well, I am excited, and we haven't had a McDonald's tasting in quite a while.
No, we should totally do this.
This could be Colin. Make a note. It's been since we celebrated the Grimace Shake, I believe. So perhaps we're coming up on that. We're coming up. Well, it's almost November, and you know what that means.
What?
We will be looking over the horizon like the great pumpkin to see if the McRib will make its annual appearance.
Oh.
It will make its annual transit across this great nation. So be on the lookout for lots of McDonald's news in the coming weeks.
What a thrill. But this is exciting. I'm on board with this.
I'm for you and it.
Okay, that brings us to our obsessions of the week. Where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. And Chris, mine was this amazing Washington Post piece. It's sad. I feel like we don't get a lot of amazing Washington Post pieces like this anymore. This is a 5-byline piece about the school shooter in Georgia, Colt Gray, who's 14 and the youngest mass shooter in 25 years. And this profile looks at his life, his parents, his aunt, his grandmother, and the contact that he had with various social welfare agencies and law enforcement. And he had many contacts with them and their failures to protect him from his parents, both of whom were totally negligent. And when you read the piece, you can't help but think that this kid is truly a victim of not only his parents, but also of a totally broken system of government agencies where nobody did their job competently.
Yeah, nobody stepped in, and his grandmother was the principal source for the piece, and the guilt that she feels because she only got sober a couple years ago, and she did what she could to try to save this kid and get him to someplace better, but she didn't get to him in time. And the guilt that she'll live with and the remorse that she'll live with is profound. And
she also pleaded with these various agencies to help him to intervene. He didn't attend school the entire year before the academic year in which the shooting happened. And she was pleading with the school to intercede and to report the family to authorities. And that never happened. That's just story after story like that.
And you can go across this nation and you can find in rural America and urban America and in suburbs, you can find every place in America where families are in crisis and kids are in crisis. And, will sound very corny, but the truth is there's somebody in your life. There's somebody who everybody within the sound of my voice, there is someone who who would benefit from loving on them, right? There's somebody out there who that would benefit from another word, another note, a text, a thing to stay in touch, to let them feel like they're connected to something else. And so let this be your encouragement today to do that.
What's your obsession, Chris?
Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is my obsession. I have marveled. So we're recording this after Kamala Harris campaigned in Ripon, Wisconsin, the birthplace of the Republican Party, and campaigned with Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris. If you want to know how politics are in America, if you're looking for what's the side about the shifting parties, if you had Kamala Harris praises Dick Cheney's public service on your bingo card for 2024, well done, because not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that would have been unthinkable. And for the same reason that J.D. Vance was it's trying to sound Reaganite on foreign policy, for the same reason that Donald Trump is back to liking Brian Kemp or saying that he likes Brian Kemp, is the same reason that Liz Cheney is front and center for the Harris campaign, because these are the voters who may well get to decide the election, that these are disaffected Republicans. And a lot of them are women. A lot of them are like Dick Cheney or Liz Cheney. They can see themselves in her. And I get that theory of the case. I don't think it's true, right? I think that what Liz Cheney's done was, I don't want to overuse the word courageous, but the way that she basically said, you know what, if I'm going down, I'm going down swinging. And she has made a point about going after Donald Trump in a very notable way. I think she erred in endorsing Colin Allred in the Senate. I think that may have undercut some of her larger message, but the obsession with Liz Cheney, I don't know how many persuadable voters Liz Cheney can affect. I don't know how many of these, I'm sure that it's a non-zero number of former Republicans or people who are still lightly Republican who don't want to vote for Kamala Harris, and maybe Liz Cheney is the correct spokesman for this. But I saw on The Federalist who's really obsessed with Liz Cheney. MAGA is really obsessed with Liz Cheney, right? I don't think most Americans spend much time thinking about Liz Cheney, but there's this piece at The Federalist that is bananas, right? And it goes on and on and on and on. Months after Cheney corralled a few Republicans to join her in the 2021 impeachment vote against Trump, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi selected her to help run Democrats' Soviet-style inquisition known as the Select Committee on January 6th. Talks about the deep state, talks all of this stuff. And it's like, on the one hand, Republicans tell me she is meaningless. She was defeated in her primary. Nobody cares about her. But at the same time, Donald Trump and MAGA obsess over this lady. And I mean, I guess this is what Liz Cheney's intention has been, is to really get up their nose and really upset them. But I'm astonished by the amount of vitriol and the amount of anger directed at Liz Cheney still. All
right, Chris, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is Reader Mail. And we have a note from Colleen R. in Austin, Texas. And she writes, "Hello, Eliana and Chris. Millennial Wretch here. Had to write in to represent the no doubt dominant proportion of your audience that is completely here for Wretch recaps of Love and Blind DC. I have countless questions which need your insight, one of which is, how did they find all of these singles that are clearly well connected in the same city but don't know each other already, or at minimum share circles? DC in particular is famously interconnected. Is this why they avoided government/political professionals, do you think? I hope Chris can overcome his certain disdain of pod attire and the generally slovenly presentation of the young men on the show, because I'd be fascinated to hear his thoughts on the storylines if you can con him into it." I have been watching this, I must say, and I do think it's because they pulled people who are not in politics at all, that these people don't know each other. And a friend's wife was telling me the other night that she was getting her nails done in Northern Virginia, and the woman next to her was saying, "Oh, I was the Golden Bachelorette and yada, yada, this and that." And apparently it really was. So I think these people are sort of all around. Anyhow,
I'm gonna try to screw my courage to the sticking place and watch an episode of this. And we need to put this on our year-end roster with
It
the
is
McDonald's tasting.
so fascinating. Also, I will note that one of the guys on there who I looked up because he is so insufferable on the show, he is the rich art dealer. I did Google him, and it looks like the art consultancy he runs, it's all inherited, and he won't stop talking about how rich he is actually based in New York, though it used to be based in DC, and he grew up in the DC area. So some of these people may not even live here. They may have been born in the DC area. But this guy is totally insufferable, and that is part of the fun of watching him. And you can see these stupid girls who are into him, and his personality is awful, but he's very, very rich, and he won't stop talking about it.
All right, I'm gonna try. We'll do it together.
Okay, you got to come back and give me your take on the art consultant.
Okay, I will watch an episode, and this is Love is Blind DC, and I will watch an episode and I will report back.
It is
I promise.
hilarious.
Okay.
All right. Our next note is from Tristan. Dear Chris, Eliana, and the Wretches team, I've come across an A+ facile file as if Chris had asked ChatGPT to write his ideal structural racism experts say text, 100% circular reasoning. And the piece is from The Guardian. And the headline reads, Structural Racism Leading to Stark Health Inequalities in London, report shows. Here are a few examples of the incisive arguments made. The review, conducted by the UCL Institute of Health Equity, led by Professor Sir Michael Marmot, found that people who are repeatedly exposed to structural racism during their daily lived lives experience worse physical and mental health as a direct consequence. It also says ethnic inequalities in poverty, housing, and employment result in poorer health outcomes for these ethnic groups.
Well, we know it's made up because no one can be really named Professor Sir Michael Marmot.
Yeah.
There can't be any such thing. And his colleague, Sir Professor Philip Badger. Just amazing. Yes. Way to go. Way to go. Thank you, Tristan. Keep up the good work.
All right, Chris, that brings us to your favorite time of the week, where I say something nice. You go first. And it's funny, ours are related in a way in which I will explain.
The Financial Times data guy who I've had quibbles with in the past, I have quibbled in the past, has a wonderful piece of good news for us. John Burns Murdoch reports that U.S. obesity rate fell for the first time in 2023. And is it Ozempic and Wegovy and that stuff? Sure. Is it lifestyle stuff? Sure. Is it all these things? Sure. Certainly, we see that the obesity levels are falling faster among college educated. And we just point out here, college education doesn't make you smarter, but it is a good screen for income. Basically, since we use college education as a demographic divider because it stands in well for income, because you can't ask about income because $100,000 isn't worth $100,000 in Washington, D.C. versus Wolf Snout County. So all that stuff. So richer people, not surprisingly, have broken through first, but the numbers are down with working class people too. And this is good news. I'm here for it. I love to see it.
Okay. My favorite item was a New York Times piece. The headline is Whole Foods tried to change this cake recipe. Customers lost it. The grocery chain's berry chantilly cake has a cult following and an extremely vocal fan base. And it starts with an anecdote about a woman visiting her local Whole Foods in Berkeley, California, to get a slice of this berry chantilly cake with its lofty layers of almond-scented cake and fluffy mascarpone frosting dotted with fresh mixed berries, and says, but there were none available. I just received the worst news in my entire life. The woman declared in a TikTok posted on September 21st from the store's parking lot. Whole Foods is discontinuing the berry chantilly cake that we all know and love. She uploaded her reaction, and it quickly drew more than 1.5 million views. For more than a week, speculation, misinformation, and outrage swirled online. Had Whole Foods eliminated the fresh berries entirely? Would individual slices exist no more? How could the company touch, let alone discontinue, its wildly popular cake, a staple at weddings, birthdays, and family celebration? A cake so renowned it had been trademarked. Chaos reigned on social media, in the news, and in the minds of chantilly cake fanatics. So it turns out I perceive this to be an inflation type thing where they changed it. They put less frosting on it, took out these fresh berries, and replaced it with jam. And so it was sort of a sad looking piece of cake without these, like, there's all this frosting and the pretty berries all over it. And this massive outcry from people who love this cake so much made Whole Foods reverse course. And the times writes, in the end, however, the berry chantilly cake was untouchable, and Whole Foods reversed any plans to alter it. And it turns out what's cute about this is that Whole Foods acquired the cake recipe from a New Orleans bakery called Bywater Bakery. So visit there, and
Tribune of
there's
the
a
people.
picture and an interview with the proprietor of Bywater Bakery in New Orleans. That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.